In the summer of 2018, Frederick, Colorado, looked like the kind of place you'd see on a postcard. A quiet suburban town, lined with freshly built homes, neatly trimmed lawns, and wide open skies that stretched forever. It was the kind of community where neighbors waved as they passed, where children played in front yards without fear, and where people believed terrible things didn't happen. For many, it was the picture of safety. Among the families that called Frederick home, one stood out for what seemed like all the right reasons: Chris and Shanann Watts, and their two little girls, Bella and Celeste. On the surface, they embodied the American dream. They had the spacious new home in a growing neighborhood. They had two adorable daughters who filled the house with laughter. And they had what looked like a happy, stable marriage. Friends and neighbors often described them as the perfect family. Shanann Watts was the heart of that household. Born in 1984 in North Carolina, Shanann had always been strong-willed and determined. Those who knew her described her as a fighter, someone who faced life's challenges head-on. That strength was especially clear after her lupus diagnosis, an autoimmune disease that left her struggling with fatigue and health complications. But Shanann refused to let the illness define her. She worked hard, stayed positive, and poured her energy into creating a stable life for her family. Her personality was vibrant. Online, she radiated confidence. She worked in direct sales for a health and wellness company, which meant her social media was filled with posts about lifestyle, positivity, and her family. Anyone who scrolled through her Facebook page would see videos of her two daughters giggling, of Chris grilling in the backyard, or of Shanann expressing love and gratitude for her husband. She presented a life that seemed enviable, one full of love, family, and joy. Chris Watts, in contrast, was quiet, reserved, and almost shy. Born in North Carolina in 1985, he had been a calm, easygoing boy who grew into a man with the same demeanor. While Shanann thrived in the spotlight of social media, Chris seemed more comfortable in the background. He worked as an operator at Anadarko Petroleum, an oil and gas company, where long hours and early mornings were part of the job. Neighbors noticed that Chris wasn't the kind of man to draw attention to himself. He wasn't loud or outgoing, but he was dependable. He was the type of husband who helped with household chores, who played with his daughters after work, and who seemed to support his wife's ambitions. In many of Shanann's videos, he appeared as the quiet partner, the man she often praised as the best husband and father. Together, they seemed like a perfect match. Where Shanann was outspoken, Chris was soft-spoken. Where Shanann thrived on activity, Chris preferred calm. Their differences seemed to balance each other out, creating a sense of harmony. Friends often said they admired the couple. They were the ones with the nice home, the happy kids, and the future that seemed secure. Bella, their oldest daughter, was 4 years old in 2018. Sweet-natured and shy, she was cautious with strangers but deeply affectionate with her parents. In videos, Bella's soft voice and gentle smile melted hearts. She was the child who often clung to her mother, the little girl who would say things that revealed just how much she loved her family. Celeste, known as Cece, was the opposite in many ways. Just 3 years old, she was full of energy and spunk. Cece had food allergies that required careful management, but Shanann worked tirelessly to keep her safe and healthy. Despite those challenges, Cece's bold personality shone through. She was the wild one, the spark in the household, the child who made everyone laugh. Together, Bella and Cece completed the image of a family living the good life. Their home reflected that image too. The Watts lived in a 5-bedroom house in the quiet Saratoga Trail subdivision. Built just a few years earlier, the house was large and modern, with light-colored siding, a front porch, and a manicured lawn. Inside, it had everything a growing family could want: spacious rooms, a big kitchen, and plenty of space for children to play. For Shanann, the home was a dream come true, something she had worked hard to achieve despite her health struggles. But more than just a house, it became a stage for the life Shanann carefully presented online. From birthday parties to family dinners, Shanann documented it all. Friends, relatives, and even strangers could see the smiling photos and cheerful videos she shared. Through those posts, the Watts family became a symbol of the perfect suburban life. Yet behind every photo and video, behind every smile and cheerful caption, was the reality that nobody else could see. Shanann believed in showing positivity, in highlighting the good. What she didn't reveal was that beneath the calm surface, small cracks were beginning to form in her marriage. She didn't show the stress of managing health issues, parenting two small children, and balancing her work with her responsibilities at home. To the world outside, however, none of that mattered. What people saw was simple: a young couple deeply in love, raising two beautiful girls in a nice home in a safe neighborhood. Chris and Shanann Watts seemed like they had everything anyone could want. And that's what makes their story so chilling. Because within weeks, that perfect image would shatter in the most devastating way imaginable. Shanann Watts wasn't just a wife and mother. She was also a storyteller of her own life. In today's world, where so much of how we see others comes through a screen, Shanann crafted her story carefully. Social media wasn't just a way to connect with friends and family. For Shanann, it was her stage. Her Facebook page became a running diary of her marriage, motherhood, and work. Each post was infused with positivity. Each video was a small performance, not a fiction, but of how she wanted her life to be seen. And the truth is, she was good at it. People admired her energy, her determination, and her constant praise for her husband and children. In countless videos, Shanann smiled brightly into the camera, her daughters running in the background, or Chris quietly by her side. She'd often speak to her followers directly, sharing health tips, motivational messages, or personal reflections. Many of her posts were tied to her work in direct sales, but they also carried something deeper: the image of a life worth admiring. In one video, Shanann beamed as she recorded Chris walking through the door after work. "Here's the best husband ever," she said proudly. Chris, reserved as always, gave a small smile, almost bashful under the camera's gaze. To Shanann, this was a way of showing gratitude. To others, it looked like she was living her dream: a supportive partner, a thriving family, and a life she had built despite her challenges. Her friends saw her as a strong, devoted mother. She often shared moments with Bella and Cece. Bella singing songs in her sweet little voice, or Cece racing around the living room with uncontainable energy. These videos weren't just content. They were windows into what seemed like the most precious kind of happiness: family life. But social media can be deceiving. For all the love-filled posts, Shanann's friends later admitted they sometimes noticed hints of strain. In some videos, Chris's body language appeared distant. He smiled less, spoke even less. While Shanann was bubbly and expressive, Chris seemed withdrawn, almost like a man playing a role he didn't believe in anymore. Of course, no one wanted to think too much about it. After all, couples had ups and downs. And for the most part, Shanann's posts reassured everyone that things were fine. The truth, though, was that Shanann leaned on social media for more than just positivity. It was also her support system. Living far from her family in North Carolina, she used Facebook to stay connected with friends and loved ones. She shared not just the good moments, but also her vulnerabilities. She spoke about her struggles with lupus, about the challenges of raising two small children, and about how grateful she was to have Chris by her side. To anyone scrolling, it was clear: Shanann adored her husband. She often described him as the best thing that ever happened to her, calling him her rock and her partner in everything. And the sincerity in her words was unmistakable. But as much as Shanann believed in her family's strength, Chris's feelings were beginning to shift. Slowly, quietly, beneath the smiling family photos, he was detaching himself from the life Shanann worked so hard to present. Motherhood defined Shanann. Every decision, every ounce of energy, was poured into raising Bella and Cece. Despite her health battles, she made sure her daughters never lacked love, stability, or attention. Bella was thoughtful, gentle, and often cautious. Her soft voice carried so much innocence, and those who knew her described her as an old soul in a child's body. She loved singing, reading, and cuddling close to her parents. She was especially protective of her little sister, stepping into the role of big sister with pride, even at such a young age. Cece, in contrast, was bold and fearless. Her energy filled the house, her giggles bouncing off the walls. She was affectionate, often climbing into her parents' arms, demanding kisses, or blurting out her love for them. Cece was a spark, the kind of child who could make anyone laugh with her mischief. Together, they were Shanann's world. She documented their milestones with photos and videos. Bella's first day of preschool, Cece's energetic dances, the birthdays filled with balloons and cakes. These weren't just family memories. For Shanann, they were treasures, proof that her efforts to create a beautiful life were working. Her devotion to her daughters was especially clear in how she managed Cece's health needs. With multiple severe allergies, Cece's care required constant attention, careful meal planning, medical checkups, and emergency readiness. Shanann took it all on without hesitation. To her, motherhood was a calling, and she embraced it fully, and she wanted the world to know it. Friends said that when Shanann spoke about her children, her entire face lit up. Her joy was contagious. Even online, strangers felt the depth of her love for Bella and Cece. But as much as Shanann poured into her children, her marriage was quietly shifting. Chris, once the steady partner she leaned on, was withdrawing more and more. Shanann was still focused on the positives, but the distance between them was slowly widening. Chris Watts was, to everyone who knew him, a man of few words. He wasn't loud, he wasn't dramatic, and he wasn't the type to draw attention to himself. In some ways, that made him appealing. He was steady, dependable, the kind of man people described as solid. At work, he was respected for his reliability. In his community, he was seen as a dedicated father. Neighbors often spotted him outside with Bella and Cece, playing games or pushing them on their bikes. To anyone watching, he looked like the picture of a loving dad. But Chris's quiet nature also meant people didn't always see what he was thinking. While Shanann expressed her love openly and often, Chris was more reserved. Over time, that difference grew more noticeable. In Shanann's videos, she was the star, bubbly, confident, and full of life. Chris, meanwhile, seemed uncomfortable with the spotlight, offering small smiles but rarely much else. Some friends thought he was simply introverted. Others thought he was shy. But what Shanann didn't realize was that Chris wasn't just shy. He was pulling away. The husband she praised online was no longer fully present. Still, Shanann continued to believe in her marriage. She continued to post videos of Chris with their daughters, highlighting the moments when he seemed engaged and affectionate. She believed he was still the partner she had always loved, even if he was quieter these days. But the truth was that Chris's silence hid something far darker than shyness. From the outside, the Watts family seemed flawless. Birthday parties were colorful, family vacations looked joyful, and holidays were filled with matching outfits and laughter. Shanann made sure these moments were captured and shared, preserving the image of a family built on love. On Christmas morning, the girls opened presents in matching pajamas. On birthdays, there were decorations, cakes, and wide-eyed smiles. On vacations, there were sunny photos of Chris carrying Bella on his shoulders or Cece splashing in a pool. It all looked effortless. Friends envied Shanann's ability to juggle so much: her children, her health, her career, and her marriage. She was seen as the woman who had it all, and Chris was seen as the supportive husband who stood behind her. But appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the polished photos and cheerful videos, cracks were beginning to form. Chris's distance was no longer just shyness. He was growing detached, less engaged, less affectionate. Shanann noticed, but she pushed forward, determined to keep her family strong. The smiles were still there, the videos still posted, the image still perfect. But something was changing. Something was slipping away. And soon, the illusion of perfection would collapse in the most shocking way imaginable. Every family has challenges. Every marriage has struggles. But in the Watts household, those struggles were hidden behind closed doors. Chris had begun to change. He was more distant, less affectionate, less engaged with Shanann and the girls. Where once he had been a steady, quiet partner, now he seemed like a man drifting away. Shanann, ever the optimist, continued to focus on the positives. She wanted to believe her marriage was still strong. She wanted to believe the family she had built was still perfect. But deep down, she began to feel the shift. The cracks were small at first: a quiet husband, a distracted father, a man less present in the family moments that once defined him. But those cracks were growing, and soon, the truth behind Chris's detachment would come to light. For now, the world still saw the Watts as the perfect family. Shanann's posts still painted a picture of love and happiness. Friends still admired their marriage. Neighbors still saw them as a model family. But the illusion was about to shatter. Because behind the smiles, behind the cheerful videos, and behind the quiet husband, a dark secret was already taking shape. And in just a matter of weeks, the Watts family would go from the picture of perfection to the center of one of the most shocking crimes in modern American history.